The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. Chapter 4, Culture. Cultures are created to protect power structures. Culture is the enforcer of authority. Culture distorts principles in order to defend the authority of evil. Culture must convince you that it is not wrong when law subjugates your worth and destroys your freedom. Culture convinces people of this by perverting the concept of morality. Morality is liberty, immorality is evil. The exercise and defense of freedom are moral. The destruction of freedom is immoral. This is pure truth of morality. Prudence is the proper application of principle. Imprudence is foolishness. Prudence is not morality. It is not immoral to kick a heavy stone with your bare foot, but it would probably be foolish. Prudence is a question of applying the principles and wisdom you have gathered in your life to achieve the goals you have for yourself. This is made possible by liberty. Without liberty, prudence is meaningless. Morality must come before prudence. The great lie of culture is that authority is not bound by morality, and that authority can enforce its own prudence upon you. The great lie of culture is that you are worth less than law. Cultures teach that intentions of prudence can be enforced by law. In this fashion, they gain excuse to control the lives of people. In order for people to learn, grow, and find happiness, people must be free to test their understanding of principles. With freedom, they can do this by a process of faith, trial, and error. In this fashion, children grow from immaturity to maturity. In this fashion, human beings gain wisdom. Cultures are agents of evil. The objective of evil is the damnation of your ability to grow strong in wisdom. The objective of evil is the destruction of your worth. In order to gain control over you, culture spreads the lie that authority is not bound by morality. It teaches that authority can destroy freedom at will and claims prudence as the reason you should willingly submit. In the name of defending you, culture claims that the destruction of freedom is morality. Cultures pretend that evil is good and that good is evil. Prudence can be found all around you. It is found in the choices you make every day. Even when a mistake is made, you learn prudence. Prudence cannot be enforced. To enforce prudence is law. Law is lie. Without the freedom to choose, you cannot learn prudence. You cannot be happy. Morality can be found all around you. Wherever you find it, you will find joy. Wherever you find immorality, you will find misery. Culture enforces authority by destroying freedom with law. This is immorality. Control of speech. Speech is controlled by culture because speech advances wisdom. Human communication accelerates growth and learning on an exponential scale. People learn principles on their own through experimentation with their environment, but they learn far quicker when they are able to communicate their thoughts through speech. Speech is the single most powerful tool of humanity. Through it, children and adults alike accelerate knowledge in anything they desire to learn. Culture cannot afford the rapid spread of human understanding. Should people learn their own worth and potential, they would never submit to the artificial authorities placed over them. Culture is about control. Cultures are designed to protect the powerful, to protect those in authority. Its job is to make sure that speech cannot flow freely. To accomplish this, it establishes a pattern of subversion of thought and propriety of speech. Authority is unquestionable. Culture first labels the questioning of authority as immoral. The rule of law, absolute respect for law enforcement, character in politics, and the nobility of kings are all examples of cultural subversion of thought. Culture cannot allow people to question their allegiance to a specific law, or a specific king, or a specific system of authority. Instead, it teaches that these kings are above question. It is never permitted to question the king, dictator, or democracy. In every culture ever devised, authority is supreme over humanity. The highest extreme of questioning authority is discussing the assassination of authorities. Even to print a line of text such as this will bring shivers to those who live under any culture. This is the grip that culture has upon speech. Questioning whether authority is right or wrong is not allowed. The system is above you. You will not fight back. Though law considers itself moral for defending itself with violence, it will teach you that you are immoral for even thinking about defending yourself against it. Lesser taboos on questioning authority exist in varying form in the cultures of history. In modern times, this is most obvious in the shame brought upon anyone who questions the respectability of police, public education teachers, or other public employees. Their work is considered to be above the work of everyone else. Their actions in their jobs are beyond reproach because they are agents of authority. It is sometimes called respect for the office or position. Questioning their right to interfere with your life will bring you the scorn of culture. This is the control of speech. Further examples exist in the belief that paying taxes is noble. Not one person would pay them if they didn't have to. Not one person pays $1 more than is demanded of them under threat of imprisonment. And yet, throughout culture, you hear people speak of the nobility of paying taxes. Taxpayer is the title given by those seeking legitimacy in political arguments. Culture teaches that good people are those who allow themselves to be extorted and controlled without thinking. Obedience to arbitrary law under the rule of law is labeled character. The more destructive a law is to humanity, the more praise of nobility culture will give to them who obey it. If authority is not questioned, if it is accepted as the proper ruler over man, slavery is the result. Germans failed to question their culture imposed upon them by the National Socialist Party. Their servitude to Adolf Hitler and his war machine were the result. Billions failed to question the culture of brotherhood championed by communism. Totalitarian slavery and the deaths of 100 million people was the result. Large or small, when you yield your mind to culture, it will make a tool of you for its own purpose. It begins when you limit your speech out of fear of culture. Diversion of property. The next step in the cultural manipulation of speech is the creation of propriety and politeness. These define the artificial enemies of society that culture would have you focus on instead of authority. They are designed arbitrarily to divert attention from the evil of authority. What would the world be like if you were free to open your mouth? The minds of people are tethered under ideas called cultural propriety, political correctness, and politeness. Political correctness is engineered slavery. It focuses attention on controlling the speech of people in such a way that they believe the enemy of people is impoliteness. They are taught to believe that they are naturally racist, sexist, and bigots. Only when culture keeps a tight control on speech are people safe from their own demons. Culture teaches the limited value of people. Coarseness of language is the shameful speaking of words or concepts outside of the propriety of culture. While there is nothing evil in a word, and languages are reinvented and molded every day, culture would have us believe that the words we use are where evil lives, instead of the crushing of the human spirit employed by authority. A curse is a wish of harm upon a person. Swearing is an oath of action. Yet both of these things have been perverted so as to teach you that speech is what is evil and not the destruction of freedom that evil people employ. Every time you find an element of speech that is culturally unacceptable to speak, you will find a scapegoat. The specific instance is irrelevant. You will always find a scapegoat. Every time you find an element of speech that is culturally unacceptable to speak, you will find a scapegoat. The specific instance is irrelevant. Culture always creates propriety to hide tyranny. Culture, in the beginning of the National Socialist movement of Germany, culture was engineered to make defending a Jew unseemly. It likewise made it impolite to challenge those who condemned Jews. This pattern is found in every culture ever created. Nazi culture was not after the control of the Jews, it was after the control of the Germans. Choice. In order to free yourself from the slavery of speech control, you must understand the principle of personal offense. If you are offended by a word or a sentence, then you have chosen anger and hurt for yourself. Culture would have you believe that it has been forced upon you, but this is not true. Culture would have you believe that evil is found in the discussion of ideas, or the passing of intentional or unintentional insults. It would have you believe that certain words or allusions where evil is to be found or allusions are where evil is to be found within society. If evil can create the enemy of speech, it can convince you to yield to its control. This is the design and purpose of culture. Though people always feel entirely justified in taking offense at speech, it is nonetheless their full choice. They have the freedom to feel anything they want when they hear the mind of another person. Yet the solution offered by culture is to force speech into a manner conducive to culture's taste. Once you have believed that the control of speech is noble, you will not wonder at why it is improper to question authority. Crushing the human spirit. While arbitrary culture is found amongst adults everywhere on earth, it is most easily viewed amongst children. Culture creates ideas of style compulsion, body image compulsion, and action compulsion. To prefer pink over blue is a personal preference. To wear blue because you fear wearing pink is the destruction brought by arbitrary culture. Cultures limit the choices available to people by creating arbitrary rules for your life and enforcing them with peer pressure. Crushing the spirit of people allows culture to gain their obedience. When people fear standing tall because they believe they are not sufficiently attractive, wealthy, or educated, culture is crushing their spirit by teaching them that they have limited worth. People who do not know their own value are easy to control. The pressures applied amongst children are the paradigm of the culture of more powerful evil. Those children who are the most adept at understanding how to conform to cultural norms and apply the strictest enforcement against everyone else are the ones who gain social power. This is a type and a shadow of the culture of nations and kings. A model citizen of culture is one who patterns themselves precisely to the ideals of culture. In premise, this means style, speech, education, and economics. In reality, this means obedience. Culture teaches people to idolize the perfect citizen. It does so because it desires your obedience as well. These people are rewarded by society for being easily molded by culture. The powers of authority and compulsion in all walks of life will always reward model citizens with tokens of nobility and will always punish those who fail to meet the standards of servitude with humiliation and ridicule. Such is the creation of a culture. Such is the making of slaves. This breakdown of the human spirit eventually forces everyone to conform. Very few will even think of fighting the power structure. Almost everyone accepts authority. Arrogance versus conceit. Culture teaches that arrogance is an unwanted valuation of self. You are a being of unlimited value. Culture is lying to you. Arrogance is condemned by culture because culture does not want people to understand how much they are worth. It purposely confounds the meanings of arrogance and conceit. Conceit is believing that you are more valuable than others. All people have infinite value. To be conceited is to degrade the value of those around you. Authority is the ultimate conceit. It lays people low lest they believe that it is they, not law, which has value. Arrogance is an understanding of your own worth. Culture condemns it in order to suggest that you are really not of sufficient value to do, say, or accomplish things that you desire. Arrogance offends others because they have been taught by culture their entire lives that they have little or no value. They are hurt by the misunderstanding that arrogant people are better than they are. They are taught that arrogance is conceit. If people were not so easily swayed by the doctrines of culture, they would recognize that all people have equal value. When they see the arrogance of a person who has faith in themselves above that of their own, they would rejoice. If an arrogant person has great value, then so do they. Culture condemns arrogance in order to crush the spirit of faith. Without culture, people would allow themselves to revel in the inspiration that arrogant people provide. The arrogance to believe that we can fly, cure disease, and accomplish wonders. The arrogance to suggest that you can govern yourself. Enthusiasm and excitement. Enthusiasm for life is frequently ridiculed by culture. Those who are excited by the wonder and beauty of our world are in danger of understanding how much they are worth. This is not something that culture can allow. Excitement and enthusiasm are allowed only in limited and predefined forms. Every culture is different, but they all provide acceptable directions and outlets for excitement. These outlets divert the arrogant expression of enthusiasm so that others will not be inspired. Culture dismisses achievement as impossible for the average person. It teaches that most people can expect only limited success in their life. It teaches people to accept that dreams are unreachable. Without exception, the reason that dreams are so hard to reach is because of culture. Laws, control, and the crushing of the human spirit limit our ability to achieve. Only human. Culture has many variations on the phrase only human in every language. The phrase implies the ultimately limited value of people. The phrase is a lie. People have an unlimited capacity for intelligence. Things in the realm of the supernatural in ancient times are commonplace today. Principles that are amazingly complex become simple to intelligent beings as they are understood. With freedom, the more you grow in learning, the more wisdom opens your mind to the purity of our reality. Cultures frequently teach that intelligence is hereditary. In conjunction with the notion that the powerful are more intelligent, this teaching is designed to imply that those in authority rightfully belong there. It is designed to teach that the intelligence of people is limited by the physical construction of their brains. Those not in authority are obviously not qualified to rule themselves. Culture needs people to accept limitation in order to swallow obedience. Glorification of historic evils. Contemporary culture has a tendency to romanticize the evils of history. Genocidal warlords such as Alexander are given the title Great. Royal masters are bestowed with the honor of having been a good king. Communism's slavery is venerated under the pretense that Joseph Stalin was the reason the system failed. The murders of law enforcement are painted white under the banner of defending the rule of law. Bloodbaths are idealized in the loyalty of armies. Culture would have us ignore the nature of history. It would have us believe that they are fantasies and stories instead of the struggle of humanity against evil. Billions have lost their lives struggling against tyranny. The lesson of history is not the honor of slaves or the good of a system or the nobility of a king. It is the nature of evil that we must learn. Do not let culture cloud your knowledge of history by glorifying tyranny. The clouding of tyranny is found in every culture on earth today and obscures the same tyranny found in the past. Those who facilitated tyranny served as the enablers of authority. I am just doing my job. Culture will not question what the job was. Culture will not allow you to believe that people have any responsibility to disobey the evil of authority. Nazis, communists, and warlords alike. Culture teaches us that the average butcher of history was just doing his job. Culture glorifies the evils of history and teaches that today's blind obedience to authority is nobility. The same blinding of the mind used by the cultures of the past is used by culture today. How correct law pretends itself to be is irrelevant. In order to enforce authority, you must destroy liberty. Obedience. Obedience to authority is the only objective of culture. It has 1,000 facets, 1,000,000 lies, but its design is always obedience. Chivalry was the code of honor created by royalty in the Middle Ages. This honor consisted of blind adoration of knights and noblemen. Peasants and serfs were taught that those who ruled over them and enforced the law of the king were always respectable and moral. The objective was the obedience of human beings to authority. The teaching of chivalry was that the knights of law enforcement had more value than everyone else. Patriotism is the code of honor created by nations in modern times. This honor consists of total allegiance to whomever controls the nation at the moment. Patriotism offers no choice. You cannot choose which nation to support. You are a slave by birth. You cannot refuse obedience. All law has total claim to you. Patriotism teaches that the nation is glorious and strong, and that people have value only inasmuch as they bow to it. The rule of law is the code of honor created by democracy. It teaches that honor is found in obedience to the law. This code teaches that you cannot examine what the law says, or who wrote it, or why. The rule of law demands total obedience. Law is a weapon, and obedience is its design. The rule of law equates criminality with morality. The rule of law teaches that law has more value than people. All cultures call disobedience treason, and scare people with ideas of treachery against what is right and proper. Treason is the premise that it is wrong to disobey the interests of authority. The truth is that it is wrong to compel others to action against their will. Since authority is always a creature of force, the claims of law are immoral and irrelevant. There is no such thing as treason. Slaves as enforcers. Those who are under the limitation of culture will always enforce culture's doctrines upon others. Culture teaches that morality is found in obedience, and so those that believe that authority is rightfully exercised over people will demand that their friends and neighbors behave according to culture's will. This is the treachery of culture. It convinces people that slavery is morality. It desires only obedience, and people return it in droves. It convinces people that the destruction of freedom is morality. It pretends that evil is good and that good is evil. All who would speak against authority in the defense of freedom are condemned. At its strongest form, culture is able to convince its people to become soldiers and murder, plunder, and conquer new peoples. It has happened in every empire. It has happened in every kingdom and nation, from Nazi warlords to barbarian hordes, and from lynch mobs to law enforcement. Authority is expanded and retained by violence. Those who participate in furthering the goals of evil are given the titles of bravery and honor by culture. Symbols of authority. Culture seeks to enforce authority by impressing upon the minds of people that they are inferior to law. When people believe that they are worth less than law, They will believe that it is their rightful place to obey. The symbols that authority uses to create the illusion that people have limited worth are very similar throughout history. The robes of modern judges compare to the robes of royalty. The wigs of late European politics compare to the crowns of royalty. The uniforms of law enforcement and the armor of knights. Captain, general, senator, magistrate, sheriff, prince, lord, titles, clothing, badges have been used in every culture in history to create the illusion of authority. Culture focuses the mind on symbols such as honor, loyalty, devotion, and duty. Such symbols are not new. It is easy for most people to recognize the foolishness of loyalty to king, dictator, or communism. However, people still fall to modern symbols such as law, democracy, and patriotism. The objective of a symbol is obedience. It is evil. Police officers carry badges to show that they are duly authorized enforcers of the law. They enforce the law upon you, but you did not authorize them. This is the illusion of authority. Culture hides tyranny behind the trappings of meaningless symbolism. It would have you believe that law is authorized to reign over you however it pleases. Instead, it presumes permission by birthright or by the geometry of your location relative to its borders. It is an illusion. Should law truly be the authorized agent of defense or production, it would have to receive the permission of every single person it claims to represent. It would have to allow every person to extricate themselves from that authority if law failed to meet its obligation. Law never seeks permission and never will. It does not represent you, it represents evil. Money and greed. Money is good. Culture has invented the lies of money's evil so that authority can more easily lay claim to it. Authority can take your ambition for improving your life by demonizing your labors. Culture teaches that people desiring greater comforts is selfish and greedy. It teaches that money is a mysterious evil. The more money is condemned, the easier it is to steal from you. Greed does not exist amongst free people. Greed is not the love of money. The love of money is only the love of a better life. Greed is the theft of money, and it exists only among tyrants. There is no end to the amount of improvement you can have in your life. There is no limit to humanity's ability to cure disease, to end hunger, and to enjoy life. Culture would have you believe that you are limited. Culture teaches you that you are not worthy of achieving your dreams. There is no greed in desiring more. There is only greed in stealing the labors of another. Theft is evil. It is the nature of authority to steal. Only tyrants possess greed. When culture teaches that working for money is greed, it also teaches that labor without money is noble. Laboring by rule of law for the collective we is taught as the proper form of ambition. If you cannot choose to give or to keep, then you are not we, you are a slave. Suit of law. Law is a weapon. Authority establishes itself as the only means of defense. Because of this, people have no recourse against the law. Law is designed to enslave all who obey it. There are many people who are able to use the law to extort. Lawyers and thieves regularly band together in democracies to loot the valuables of people. It is commonplace to fear behaviors and speech because they will be used as a pretense for extortion. The idea of law that licenses extortion is liability. This idea teaches that one man is responsible for the failures of another. It is commonly accepted as a noble principle of justice. It is not justice, it is a lie. Liability is not a principle. Principles need no enforcement. The reason liability laws are enforced is to extract massive sums of money from anyone who happens to be able to pay. Liability teaches that you have a responsibility under law to prevent the failures of others. If you have more money than they do. In a free world, people's actions are their own, and their failures bring consequences. These consequences of principle are necessary to the growth and understanding of humanity. Law twists the consequences and assigns liability by fiat. Law confounds our understanding of true principles with obfuscation. This is done to enslave and extort. Collectivism. Culture teaches the worthiness of the common good employed by force. It teaches that it is acceptable to issue law to advance a collective ideal. Whether to pay for a project or control behavior, compulsion is frequently labeled public interest. If these things are truly for the benefit of the people, why must they be forced in order to accomplish them? Remember the difference between principle and law. Principle requires no enforcement. No law is required in order for people to feed and shelter themselves. If something must be done by force in order to accomplish it, then it is not a good thing. It is only something that authority wants. All government, all violence, and all laws are methods of forcing you to yield money and motive without your permission. If these were things that truly provided benefit to you, then you would do them willingly. In a free market, you can only get that which you pay for. In government, you can easily get anything you want at the expense of others. Those who have the most to take are the easiest to rob. Culture uses ideas such as the working class and the rich. These ideas have no meaning, since all classes work, and even the poor of today are rich compared to the rest of history. These ideas are just tools of cultural manipulation. If culture can create social classes and convince you that they are at war, then it can hide its own tyranny. Culture creates collectivism with individual crushing labels such as we and our. People are taught that within a nation, they are our children rather than the parents. Culture teaches that we want laws and taxation, and that we fight wars. The destruction of the individual in collectivism directly serves the purpose of evil. Collectivism teaches that good things can come from compulsion. It teaches that people can be forced to accomplish things for their own good. It pirates the love people have for their neighbors and twists it into authorities' demands. Slavery is the result. If an individual will not choose a thing, then it is not good for him. Force crushes the human spirit. Choice enables life. Morality and values. Evil is not found in the stupidity of man. Evil is found in the slavery of man. Law impersonates morality. Culture teaches the ultimate infallibility of law in order to compel obedience. Even when law is wrong, culture teaches that the moral thing to do is to obey. Law presumes to enforce prudence on people by calling it morality. This is the ultimate deceit. Morality is freedom. Law destroys freedom and calls it morality. Freedom is the cure for imprudence. All the social ills that law presumes to correct exist because people are not free to learn and grow. With limited ability for growth, principles are confused, and foolish behavior is the frequent result. Freedom brings wisdom, peace, and prosperity. The history of freedom shows this clearly. Force and compulsion destroy the value of human beings and dissolve the will of their spirit. Evil steals the sovereignty you have over your own life. Nothing righteous can come from the destruction of freedom. Culture teaches that only nuts and crazies challenge authority. Law is the holiest and most sacred emblem of culture. Insanity is not an ability. Sanity. Culture creates that only nuts and crazies challenge authority. Law is the holiest and most sacred emblem of culture. Insanity is not an ability to perceive reality. It is a willing rejection of reality in favor of the artificial constructs of tyranny. Law threatens violence upon all who refuse to obey it. Would you choose to act upon an artificial view of reality, you are insane. People obey law out of fear of death until they can be properly cultured to accept the rule of law without question. Cultural indoctrination is insanity. The definition of insanity is blind obedience. It is insane to believe that those in power over people rightfully belong there. It is insane to assume that they will always be there. It is insane to believe that law has the right to command the obedience of people. The culture of royalty, the culture of patriotism, and the culture of law are all insanity. No human being who understands the fullness of their own worth would ever accept the notion that someone ought to rule over them. It is the function of culture to blind the eyes of people to their own worth, and to deafen their ears to any speech that may teach them. When cultural influence is at its peak, insanity ravages the mind. Obedience is the object of authority, and authority wants no possibility of rebellion. The definition of insanity is blind obedience. Defense of freedom. Culture teaches that only police have the right to defend. It teaches that only authority has the right to decide if you are worthy of defense and what level of defense it will provide. While it teaches that it is never acceptable for you to defend yourself, culture teaches that when law implements kidnapping and murder to enforce its authority, it is always acceptable. In order to remove all thought of people fighting their masters, culture teaches that revolt is never acceptable. Rebellion without violence is almost always impossible. Culture ensures that authority holds a monopoly on violence, and it has no compunction about kidnapping, imprisonment, and murder. The only way to escape authority is to destroy all tyranny. This is the reason massive wars have been necessary to destroy entrenched tyrants such as Adolf Hitler. Culture controls speech to stop authority from being questioned. It creates ideas of propriety to hide its own tyranny. The only remaining element is to make sure that if someone does discover their own worth, that they cannot extricate authority from their lives. This is done by making the defense of freedom immoral. The price of freedom is blood. The reason for this is simple. Evil does not care if you live or die. It will kill you before it yields control over your life to you. Hundreds of millions have died in history's wars proving hundreds of millions have died in history's wars proving this principle. Every instance of a thug maiming, raping, or killing an innocent person proves this principle. While the vast majority of people are not evil, there are powerful tyrants who will never yield. They are men who will scorch the earth in order to gain or maintain authority. The only way to end tyranny is to destroy every tyrant. The more that tyrants are allowed to work the devices of culture upon people, the harder tyranny is to extricate and the more lives it will cost to do so. This is the reason that culture teaches that the only proper way for you to defend yourself against law is to obey the law. The teaching preserves tyranny. 100 million people have died at the hands of communists because so few were willing to ignore the law and instead do what was right. Europe was nearly obliterated because so many people valued the law more than liberty. They failed to stop Adolf Hitler when he was still weak. Removing the true nature of violence from news and relegating its understanding to the artificial violence of entertainment teaches people that there is safety in slavery. News reports enable authority when the true cost of tyranny is removed from view. Culture hides the plainest images of blood from people in order to keep them passive. In reality, evil will stop at nothing to control you, including destroying everything you have and everyone you love. Violence is used in the preservation of tyranny every day. Violence and murder are only weapons of immorality when used to destroy freedom. The defense of freedom is never immoral. Any man who will wield the weapons of violence against innocent people in order to gain authority must be destroyed.